The rain poured hard that night. A billionaire's car sat dead on the side of the road, its engine silent, every expert baffled. But then, out of the shadows, came a girl. Her clothes were soaked, her hands trembling, and she whispered the words that would change her life forever. "If you permit, I will try." The billionaire almost laughed. What could a homeless girl possibly know about $1 million engine? But within minutes, as her hands moved over the machine like magic, something incredible happened. That night, one small act of courage turned forgotten life into a global miracle. And by the time the engine roared back to life, the billionaire realized he hadn't just met a mechanic. He'd met a genius who would soon change the world. This is the story of Lily Morgan, the girl who turned try into triumph. Welcome to BrainFuel, where every story sparks inspiration. Here, ordinary moments turn into life-changing lessons. So sit back, because today we're diving into a story that proves one thing. You don't need a title to make history, just the courage to say, "If you permit, I will try." The night split open with thunder so loud it rattled the windows of the luxury car. Rain came down in sheets, drumming on the sleek black hood of a Rolls-Royce Phantom that gleamed even under the storm's fury. The highway stretched empty in both directions. No headlights, no city lights. Just a crackle of lightning streaking across a bruised sky. Inside the car sat one of the richest men in the country, Richard Larrington, a billionaire known for his ruthless business instincts and his love for perfection. Everything in his life ran like clockwork, until tonight. He was on his way to a private jet that waited on the outskirts of the city. A deal worth hundreds of millions was supposed to close by midnight, and his presence was non-negotiable. The car's digital clock blinked 10:47 p.m. as the wipers struggled to keep up with the downpour. His driver, Henry, gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles white. Then came the sound that no billionaire ever wants to hear, a low, choking call from the engine, followed by silence. The car shuddered once, then died completely. The headlights flickered and went out, leaving them in complete darkness. Richard's voice sliced through the air. "Henry, what just happened?" I don't know, sir," Henry stammered, pressing the start button again. The engine gave a hollow click, then nothing. Richard leaned forward, irritation building in his chest. "Try again." Henry did. Once. Twice. A third time. Still nothing. Outside, the storm howled like an angry beast. Water pooled around the tires, and the powerful machine that had once glided effortlessly across highways now sat useless in the mud. Richard slammed his hand against the dashboard. This car costs more than most people's houses. How can just stop? Henry swallowed hard. "It's possible the rain affected the electronics, sir. Maybe a short circuit." "Don't give me excuses," Richard snapped. He looked at his phone, hoping to call for help. No signal. The network bars were gone. He cursed under his breath. For the next 10 minutes, they sat in the eerie quiet, the only sounds of drumming rain and the occasional crack of thunder. Richard's temper boiled hotter with each passing second. He wasn't used to waiting. He wasn't used to helplessness. He stepped out of the car, his Italian leather shoes instantly sinking into the mud. The rain hit him like icy needles, soaking his tailored suit. He yanked the hood of his coat over his head and looked around the desolate road. Not a single car in sight. "Perfect," he muttered sarcastically. Henry joined him with an umbrella that was quickly losing the battle against the wind. "Sir, maybe we should wait inside. Help might pass by." "Help?" Richard scoffed. "At this hour? On this road? Don't be ridiculous." He kicked at a puddle in frustration, splashing muddy water onto his expensive pants. His perfectly controlled world was unraveling, right there in the storm. That's when he noticed movement through the sheets of rain. Something or someone walking toward them. At first, it was just a shadow. Then lightning flashed, revealing a slender figure trudging up the road, clutching a half-broken umbrella that flipped backward in the wind. Henry squinted. "Someone's coming, sir." Richard frowned. At this hour? The figure got closer, a young woman, soaked to the bone, her clothes thin and tattered. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her shoes were worn, her backpack torn at the seams. Despite the storm, she moved with purpose, not fear. When she reached them, she paused a few feet away, rain dripping down her face. "Sir, your car's not starting?" she asked softly, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. Henry stepped forward protectively. "We don't need help, miss. Please move along." The girl didn't move. Her eyes, clear and steady, shifted to the car, studying it as though she understood every inch of it. She spoke again, a little more firmly. "If you permit," she said, "I will try." Richard blinked, taken aback by her confidence. "Excuse me," he asked, almost laughing. "You think you can fix that?" He gestured toward the Rolls-Royce. "This isn't some street bike. It's a high-performance V12 engine." The girl didn't flinch. "Engines are engines," she said simply. "Doesn't matter what name's on them." Henry let out a short, nervous chuckle. "Sir, she's just a kid. Probably doesn't even know what a torque converter is." But Richard was watching her closely. There was something strange about the way she stood, unshaken by his tone, unbothered by the storm. Her hands weren't fidgeting. Her eyes weren't pleading. She wasn't asking for money or sympathy. She was offering help. And honestly, what did he have to lose? He crossed his arms. "Fine," he said finally, his voice edged with sarcasm. "Go ahead, genius. Let's see what you can do." The girl nodded once and walked toward the car. Henry raised his hands in disbelief. "Sir, this is ridiculous. What if she damages him more?" Richard gave him a cold look. "Henry, it's already broken. Let her try." The girl placed her hand gently on the hood, closing her eyes for a moment as though listening. Lightning illuminated her face, revealing dirt smudges and exhaustion, but also focus. She lifted the hood, letting the rain hiss against the hot metal, and peered inside. For a few seconds, she just looked, scanning every inch of the engine compartment, her eyes darting like she was mapping the entire system in her head. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "It's not power failure, it's fuel flooding." Henry frowned. "What?" She looked up. "Your injectors are clogged. The rain and mud must have gotten into the air intake. When you slowed down, restarting it over and over just flooded the lines more." Her explanation was clear, confident, like she'd been doing this her whole life. Richard exchanged a glance with his driver. "How do you know that?" he asked slowly. The girl smiled faintly through the rain. "Because it sounds like it's trying to breathe, but can't." Her answer made no logical sense, and yet, somehow, it did. She turned back to him. "If you'll allow me, sir, I can fix it. But I'll need a handkerchief and something thin, like a wire." Richard raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You really think you can fix a $600,000 engine in the middle of a storm with a wire?" She nodded. "If you permit, I will try." Her words hung in the air, simple, humble, but powerful. Something about her tone disarmed him. Maybe it was a quiet determination in her voice. Maybe it was the fact that she didn't beg, she believed. Finally, Richard sighed, shaking his head in disbelief. "All right, you have 5 minutes." The girl smiled slightly and rolled up her sleeves. In the rain refused to stop, pouring down like the heavens were testing the patience of everyone standing on that lonely road. Lightning flashed across the sky, momentarily lighting up the drenched faces of 3 people: a billionaire, his worried driver, and a soaked homeless girl who had just volunteered to fix what the experts couldn't. Amara, though they didn't know her name yet, moved closer to the car with quiet confidence. Her thin jacket clung to her body, rainwater dripping from her sleeves, but her eyes stayed locked on the dead engine like she was studying an old friend in distress. "Be careful," Henry, the driver, warned, stepping forward. "You could get hurt. This car systems are complicated. There's electrical wiring, high voltage, sensors." She didn't even look up. "Engines may look complicated," she said, her voice calm. "But at their heart, they all speak the same language. You just have to listen." Her words made Richard raise an eyebrow. No one spoke about machines like that. People brag about owning them, not understanding them. But this girl talked like the car was alive. Amara reached beneath the hood, running her fingers along the cold metal. She didn't have gloves, no flashlight, no tools, just instinct, experience, and courage. The engine smelled of burnt fuel and wet oil. Steam hissed out as rainwater hit hot surfaces. But she didn't flinch once. She turned to Henry. You said you restarted it after it stalled? Yes, about 10 times, Henry replied, folding his arms. Amara nodded. That's the problem. You flooded the engine. Henry frowned. Flooded? What does that mean? She stood up slightly, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. It means too much fuel entered the cylinders without proper ignition. The engine's choked on its own gas. It can't breathe. Richard tilted his head, curious despite himself. And you figured that out by what? Looking at it. Amara gave a small smile. No, sir. I heard it. He blinked. You heard it? She nodded slowly. When your driver turned the key, the sound of compression wasn't right. It wasn't a starter or battery. The tone was too heavy, like it's struggling to rotate. That means the fuel mixture's wrong. Her explanation was simple, but her tone carried the weight of someone who'd spent years learning by doing. Not by textbooks, but by greasy hands and long nights in repair shops. Henry looked doubtful. That's a nice theory, but without the proper tools, you can't fix it. Amara finally turned to him, her dark eyes steady. I can try, but I'll need something small, a pin, a piece of wire, anything thin. Richard, intrigued, reached into his coat pocket and handed her a silver pen. Will this work? Amara examined it. Perfect. She twisted the pen apart, removing the thin metal spring inside. This will do. Richard couldn't help but chuckle under his breath. You're using my $300 pen to fix my $600,000 car. This should be interesting. Amara didn't respond. She crouched lower, prying open a small access panel near the air intake, careful not to drop the screws in the rain. Her movements were fast, deliberate. She worked like someone who knew every heartbeat of an engine, who understood that even a machine has rhythm. For a few moments, there was only the sound of rain, and her quiet muttering as she checked each part by touch. Then, softly, she said, You've been driving through mud, right? Henry nodded. Yes. The road before this was awful. Amara sighed. Then it makes sense. The intake's clogged. Mud and water got into the air filter and sensors. That's why it stalled when you slowed down. She wiped her hands on the billionaire's handkerchief, which he had just handed her moments ago, then gently tapped one of the fuel lines. This here, she said, needs to breathe, just like a person. When it's suffocated, it shuts down to protect itself. Henry blinked, almost offended. Cars don't breathe, kid. Amara smiled faintly. Maybe not like we do, but engines need air and rhythm. That's their breath. You don't have to believe me, sir. Just watch. Richard leaned closer, folding his arms, his earlier annoyance replaced by curiosity. He wasn't sure what fascinated him more, her strange mechanical intuition or her fearlessness in front of him. Amara began cleaning the intake with the silk handkerchief, wringing out the rainwater, then twisting the metal spring to poke through the narrow injector line. Her hands moved quickly, her expression serious, focused. Richard spoke quietly to Henry. She's either a genius or completely insane. Henry muttered, I bet on insane, sir. But within minutes, Amara stood up, her clothes soaked, her hair dripping, and said, Try it now. Henry hesitated, glancing at Richard for permission. Go on, the billionaire said. Let's see what the miracle worker can do. Henry climbed in, turned the key, and nothing happened. The silence felt heavy. The girl bit her lip, watching the headlights flicker weakly. Richard sighed. Well, it was worth a try. Wait, she interrupted quickly, raising a hand. Once more, please. Her tone was so calm, so certain, that Richard hesitated, then nodded. Henry turned the key again. The engine coughed, sputtered, and vroom. The deep growl of the V12 filled the air, smooth and powerful, as if the car had just woken up from a deep sleep. Henry's jaw dropped. No way. The headlights came to life, reflecting off the wet road. Steam rose from the hood, illuminated by the car's glow. Richard stared, stunned. His expensive machine, dead moment ago, was now purring like it had never been broken. He looked at her, disbelief mixing with admiration. How did you do that? Amara shrugged gently, wiping rain from her face. I told you, it just needed someone to listen. Her words hit Richard in a way he didn't expect. He'd spent his entire life surrounded by people who talked, demanded, bragged. But this girl, drenched, trembling, with nothing to her name, had simply listened. She closed the hood softly, careful not to scratch the car's paint, then stepped back. The rain still poured, but somehow it didn't seem as cold anymore. Richard glanced at her muddy shoes, her soaked clothes, and then at the living, breathing proof of her skill behind him. Who was this girl? And how did someone with nothing manage to understand what his entire team of engineers couldn't? He didn't know it yet, but that question, and this moment on a stormy, forgotten road, would change both their lives forever. The engine's roar sliced through the sound of the rain like thunder announcing a miracle. The one silent road now echoed with the deep hum of a perfectly tuned machine, the kind of sound car lovers dream about. For a moment, nobody moved. Richard just stood there, rain dripping from his hair, staring at the purring Rolls-Royce like it had come back from the dead. Henry's jaw was practically on the ground. I can't believe it, he stammered. It actually started. Amara smiled faintly, her hands trembling from cold but her eyes calm. It wasn't that bad, she said quietly, as if she hadn't just outsmarted a multimillion-dollar problem with nothing but spring and determination. Richard blinked several times, still processing what had just happened. Not that bad, he repeated incredulously. That car's been in and out of Larrington Motors for months, and you fixed it with a Penn spring. Amara gave a small, embarrassed shrug. Sometimes the simplest things make the biggest difference, sir. She said it humbly, not bragging, not seeking praise. Just a simple truth from someone who saw the world differently. Richard studied her for a moment, noticing the dirt on her face, the way her thin jacket clung to her small frame, the exhaustion that lingered in her eyes. She was freezing, yet she didn't complain once. The rain still poured around them, but it didn't matter anymore. Something had shifted. The storm outside now felt like a backdrop to something extraordinary. Henry finally found his voice. How? How did you even know what to do? He asked, genuinely amazed. You didn't even use a scanner or tools. Amara's eyes softened as she looked at the engine. My father taught me how to read engines by sound. He used to say, a good mechanic doesn't fix cars with his hands. He fixes them with his ears. She glanced at the hood, then back at them. I listened. The rhythm was off. The air and fuel weren't mixing right. Once I cleared the line and reset the valve manually, it could breathe again. Henry blinked, shaking his head in disbelief. You talk about engines like they're alive. Amara smiled gently. In a way, they are. If you listen long enough, you realize they each have their own heartbeat. Richard chuckled softly, though it wasn't out of mockery. It was pure fascination. You sound like a poet disguised as a mechanic. She looked down shyly. Maybe, but engines, they make sense to me. People don't. There was silence for a moment, filled only by the rhythmic hum of the revived car. The store began to lighten, the rain softening into a drizzle. The faint orange glow of the streetlight reflected off puddles on the ground. Richard finally stepped closer to her. You said your father taught you. Where is he now? Amara hesitated, her eyes flickering with emotion. He passed away 3 years ago, she said softly. He used to run a small repair shop near the old train yard. After he died, everything went downhill. The shop closed. The bills kept coming. I tried to keep it going, but you can't pay rent with skill alone. Her voice cracked slightly, but she forced a smile. Now I fix things when I can. Old bikes, generators, anything. Sometimes people pay me. Sometimes they don't. It's fine. I just like helping. For a man who lived in boardrooms, who dealt in numbers, profits, and luxury, her words hit Richard differently. She didn't care about money, reputation, or status, only the satisfaction of making something work again. He took a deep breath, looking at the engine one more time. You realize what you did tonight, right? That car's been through 3 engineers, and none of them could figure it out. He pointed at her gently. You just did it out here in the rain with your bare hands. Amara's lips curved into a small, almost bashful smile. I just got lucky, sir. Luck, Richard said, shaking his head. No, that wasn't luck. That was skill, real skill. Henry nodded in agreement. If I didn't see it myself, I'd swear it was magic. Amara chuckled softly. It's not magic. Machines just like being understood. She turned back toward the car, watching the rainwater roll down the hood. Her reflection shimmered faintly against the black paint, distorted by the water, a girl invisible to most of the world, but in that moment, she looked powerful, capable, seen. Richard's voice broke the quiet. You know, I've got engineers in my company who make 6 figures a year and couldn't pull off what you just did. She looked at him, unsure how to respond. He continued, You didn't just fix a car. Amara, you saved me from missing a deal worth $500 million. Her eyes widened. Half a what? He smiled faintly. Let's just say you saved me from a very bad night. Amara's face softened. I'm glad it helped. Then, without hesitation, she stepped back and said, You should go now, sir. You'll make your meeting. Richard frowned. What about you? You're drenched. You don't even have a ride. She gave a small laugh, shaking her head. Don't worry about me. I walk everywhere. It's kind of my thing. He looked at her, really looked this time. The kindness in her eyes, the quiet strength in her voice, the dignity she carried despite her circumstances. Before he could say anything more, she took a step back, waved politely, and turned away, walking into misty rain as though she'd never been there. But something inside Richard stirred, a feeling he hadn't known in years. Respect, gratitude, and a strange curiosity that tugged at his chest. He called out after her, Wait! She turned slightly, the rain outlining her silhouette in the streetlight. What's your name? He asked. Amara, she said softly. Just Amara. And then she was gone, her small figure fading into the night, swallowed by the rain. Richard stood there for a long moment, listening to the car's gentle purr, his mind spinning faster than the engine inside it. He didn't believe in fate. He built his empire on logic, strategy, and precision, but tonight felt different. There was something about that girl, something rare, something the world didn't see often enough. As he finally climbed back into the car, Richard couldn't shake her words from his head. Engines are like people. Sometimes they just need someone patient enough to understand them. He smiled faintly to himself as Henry pulled back onto the road. The deal could wait, because deep down he knew the real story of the night had already begun. The rain began to ease as the engine's steady hum filled the silence of the lonely highway. It was almost peaceful now, the kind of peace that comes right after chaos, when everything finally makes sense. The once angry storm softened into a drizzle, and the clouds parted just enough to let a faint silver moon peek through. Richard Larrington stood beside his Rolls-Royce, still staring at the girl who had just resurrected it from the dead. His suit was soaked, his shoes ruined, but none of that mattered. For the first time in years, something had caught him completely off guard. Not a business deal, not a rival, but a homeless girl who had just outsmarted his own team of engineers. Amara, that was the name she had given him. Simple, unpolished, but somehow graceful. She stood a few feet away, her hands tucked under her arms for warmth, her wet hair clinging to her cheeks. The rain glistened on her face like tiny diamonds. Despite the exhaustion in her eyes, there was quiet pride there too, the kind that comes from knowing you did something right, even when no one expected you to. Richard finally broke the silence. You fixed it, he said, still in disbelief. Amara smiled faintly. I told you I'd try. He chuckled softly, a sound that surprised even him. You didn't just try. You succeeded. She looked down shyly. I'm glad it worked, sir. Henry, the driver, shook his head, still amazed. I've been driving for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like that. You're something else, kid. Amara shrugged, her voice humble. It's nothing special. My father used to fix cars all day. I just watched and learned. Her mention of her father seemed to carry weight, like the memory hurt, but also gave her strength. Richard tilted his head. You said your father taught you. He must have been a great mechanic. A soft smile crossed her face. He could fix anything, not just cars, but radios, bikes, even old washing machines. People used to bring him broken things from all over the neighborhood. He'd fix them for almost nothing. He said the world already has enough people who take. We need more people who repair. Richard felt that sentence hit deep. He'd spent his life building and acquiring, not repairing. He built empires, bought companies, and fired people without hesitation. Fixing things? That wasn't part of his world anymore. What happened to him? He asked gently. Amara's smile faded a little. He got sick, she said quietly. Couldn't afford the hospital bills. I was still in high school then. When he passed, the shop closed. The landlord took it over. Since then, I've been trying to get by. The drizzle turned to mist as her words hung heavy in the air. Henry shifted uncomfortably, while Richard just stood still, not as a billionaire now, but as a man listening to another human being's story. Amara tried to brighten the mood. But it's okay, she said softly. I still fix things when I can. Mostly old machines people throw away. They say I should stop wasting time on junk, but I like bringing things back to life. It feels good. Richard nodded slowly. You fix things because you care. She looked at him curiously. Doesn't everyone? He smiled faintly, almost sadly. Not in my world. That made her frown. Then your world needs fixing too. Her words, innocent and honest, hit him harder than she could imagine. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that. Not by employees, not by partners, and definitely not by a drenched girl in torn shoes. But somehow, her simplicity carried more truth than all the polished words he heard in boardrooms. Henry cleared his throat. Sir, maybe we should get going. The jet's still waiting. Richard glanced at his watch, then at the girl again. Right. He hesitated, then turned back to Amara. You've saved me tonight. Amara, you deserve to be rewarded. She immediately shook her head. No, sir. Please. I didn't do it for money. Richard blinked. Then what do you want? She thought for a moment before replying. If you know anyone who needs a mechanic, even for small jobs, just tell them about me. That's all. Her voice was humble, but her tone was full of quiet strength. She wasn't begging. She was asking for a chance. Richard looked at her, realizing how rare that kind of dignity was. Most people would have grabbed at the opportunity for quick money, but not her. She wanted something that could last, a way forward. You don't even have a phone, do you? He asked. Amara shook her head. No, sir. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a sleek black card, and handed it to her. The gold letters gleamed under the car's headlights. Come to this address tomorrow morning, he said firmly. Ask for me. Tell them Mr. Larrington sent you. She hesitated before taking the card. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but disbelief. Larrington Motors, she whispered, reading the logo. Her eyes widened. You mean you're that Larrington? The one who... He nodded. The one who owns a company that built this car. Amara stared at him, stunned. She had just fixed a billionaire's car, without realizing it belonged to him. Her voice came out as a whisper. I didn't know, sir. I thought you were just someone important. Richard smiled warmly. I've been called worse. Henry smirked from the side, trying to hide a grin. Amara looked back down at the card, still unsure. Sir, are you sure? I'm not really qualified for anything. I never went to college. Richard shook his head. You don't need a degree to have talent. You just prove that. She looked up at him, eyes glistening under the headlights. Thank you, sir. I won't waste this chance. He nodded. I don't believe you will. For the first time that night, Amara allowed herself to smile, a genuine, hopeful smile that lit up her tired face. As she tucked the card safely into her pocket, a quiet breeze passed between them. The storm was gone now, replaced by the calm after chaos, and a sense that something new had just begun. Richard stepped into the car, but before closing the door, he turned to her once more. You said engines just need someone patient enough to understand them, right? She nodded. He smiled. I think people are the same way. Amara tilted her head slightly, smiling back. Maybe so, sir. Then she stepped aside as the car pulled away, the taillights glowing red against the wet road. She watched it disappear into the distance until only the faint sound of the engine, her handiwork, remained. And as she stood there alone beneath the fading rain, she whispered softly to herself, "Tomorrow, everything changes." The next morning arrived cold and gray, but to Amara, it felt like the first sunrise of her new life. She barely slept that night, not because she didn't have a place to rest, but because excitement and fear wouldn't let her. The golden business card Mr. Larrington had given her lay pressed safely in her palm all night, like a lifeline. She kept staring at the embossed letters, Larrington Motors Headquarters. It sounded like a dream, one too big for a girl who'd been sleeping in a shelter just 24 hours ago. By dawn, she washed her face in the public restroom near the bus station, tied her hair neatly with an old rubber band, and patched a rip in her jeans using a safety pin. She looked in the mirror and whispered, "You can do this, Amara. Just breathe." The city was buzzing as she rode the bus toward the glass towers of downtown. Her heart thumped louder with every stop. When she finally stepped off, she froze for a moment, staring at the towering building before her, Larrington Motors Global Headquarters. It was enormous, with mirrored walls that reflected the morning sky. Expensive cars rolled into the gates, each shining like liquid metal. Men and women in suits hurried through the revolving doors, their expressions confident, their clothes crisp. Amara looked down at her faded jacket and patched jeans. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself again, "You belong here today. Maybe not forever, but today." She walked toward the security desk. The guard, a tall man with a trimmed beard, gave her a puzzled look. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked. She nodded nervously, pulling the business card from her pocket. I'm here to see Mr. Richard Larrington. He told me to come." The guard's brows furrowed. "Mr. Larrington? As in the Mr. Larrington?" "Yes, sir," she said softly, trying to sound sure. He chuckled a little, clearly unconvinced. "Miss, people don't just walk in off the street to see the CEO." "I know how it sounds," she said quickly, "but he gave me this card himself. Last night, his car broke down on the old highway. I helped fix it." The guard took the card and examined it. The logo shimmered under the lobby lights. It was genuine. His expression shifted from disbelief to curiosity. "Well, this is real," he admitted. "Wait here." He picked up the phone and made a quick call. After a few moments, his eyes widened. "Yes, sir. Right away." He hung up and looked at her in shock. "He said to send you up immediately." Amara's heart skipped. "He did." The guard nodded, smiling now. "You must have really impressed him." He handed her a visitor's badge. "Top floor executive suite. Good luck." She thanked him and stepped into the elevator. As the glass doors closed, her reflection stared back, nervous, unsure, but determined. The elevator climbed smoothly, each floor flashing past. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a hallway that looked like something from a movie. Marble floors, sleek walls, quiet as a cathedral. A woman at the reception desk looked up from her computer. "Good morning. You must be Amara." Amara blinked. "You know my name?" The woman smiled kindly. "Mr. Larrington told us to expect you." Before she could respond, a deep voice called from behind the glass doors, "Send her in, please." Amara turned. Richard Larrington stood by the window of his office, looking out over the city skyline. He turned around with a warm smile. "Amara," he said, "right on time." She stepped in slowly, still amazed. I almost thought this wasn't real." "Oh, it's very real," he said with a chuckle. "Come, sit down." His office was enormous. Polished wood, bookshelves, models of luxury cars, and framed photos of his factories around the world. It felt like power itself lived in the room. Amara sat down carefully, afraid to even move too much. Richard studied her for a moment. "I didn't sleep much last night either," he admitted. "I kept thinking about what you said, that the world has enough people who take and not enough who repair." She smiled shyly. "My father used to say that." "He was a wise man," Richard said softly. "And so are you." He leaned forward. "I meant what I said last night. You have a rare gift. I want to give you a chance to use it properly." Amara blinked. "A chance?" He nodded. "Yes, I want you to work here. Start in our technical diagnostics division. You'll train with my top engineers. Learn, grow, and prove yourself." She froze, eyes wide. "Work here? In your company?" Richard smiled. "You already passed your first test. You fix a car my engineers couldn't. Now let's see what else you can do." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "Sir, I don't even know what to say." "Say yes," he said with a grin. She laughed softly, wiping her eyes. "Yes, sir. 1,000 times yes." He stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to Larrington Motors, Amara." She shook his hand, firm, confident, with a spark of something new in her chest. Hope. Just then, the door opened, and a tall man in a white lab coat stepped in. "Sir, you asked for me?" "Yes," Richard said. "Amara, this is Dr. Felix Turner, our chief engineer. You'll be shadowing him for the next few weeks." Dr. Turner raised an eyebrow when he saw her. "Sir, with all due respect, she looks—" "Like someone who earned her place," Richard interrupted firmly. "Give her every resource she needs." Felix hesitated, then nodded. "Understood." Richard turned back to Amara. "You start today. Are you ready?" She stood tall, nervous but proud, more than ever. As she followed Dr. Turner out, Richard watched her go. The girl who came from nothing, who'd fixed more than just a broken engine. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her courage, challenge her limits, and change her life forever. When the elevator doors closed behind her, Richard turned back to the window and smiled to himself. "Sometimes," he whispered, "the world's best engineers aren't found in boardrooms. They're found on the streets." Down below, the city buzzed with life. Amara stepped out into a new world, one filled with possibilities she never dreamed of. The sun finally broke through the clouds, bathing the glass towers in gold. And for the first time in years, she felt it, the warmth of a future she could finally believe in. Amara's first day at Larrington Motors didn't start with applause. It started with stares. The vast engineering floor buzzed with the hum of machines, clicking keyboards, and the faint metallic scent of oil and steel. Sleek prototypes stood on raised platforms like sculptures in a museum. Every corner of the room whispered genius. And now, in the middle of it all, stood a girl in second-hand clothes and worn shoes. Dr. Felix Turner walked ahead briskly, clipboard in hand. "Keep up," he said without looking back. Amara nodded, clutching her small notebook like armor. She'd been nervous before, but the sheer size of the place, the walls lined with blueprints, the engineers in lab coats, made her feel like a small spark in a sea of lightning. As they walked through the main lab, conversation stopped. Eyes followed her, some curious, others skeptical. "Who's that?" one whispered. "The new recruit? She doesn't look like an engineer. Probably someone's intern or charity case." Amara heard every word, though she pretended not to. Her cheeks burned, but she kept her chin up. Felix led her to a long table covered in disassembled engine parts. "This is your workstation," he said, setting his clipboard down. "For the next 2 weeks, you'll observe. Don't touch anything unless told." "Yes, sir," she said quietly. He glanced at her, his tone clipped. "You impress Mr. Larrington somehow. That's rare. But here, results matter more than stories." "Understood." Amara met his gaze and nodded. "Understood." Felix turned away, muttering, "We'll see." For the next few hours, Amara observed everything. The engineers running diagnostics, testing torque ratios, calibrating sensors. She scribbled notes in her old notebook, sketching engine layouts and marking where they went wrong. She might not have had a degree, but she had something else. Instinct. The kind her father once said no classroom could teach. During lunch, she sat alone at a corner table, eating a simple sandwich she brought from home. A few younger engineers at the next table whispered again. "Did you hear? She's that girl the boss found on the street." "No way." "I swear, my cousin in security told me. She fixes car or something." "So what?" "Street luck doesn't build engines. Amara forced herself to keep chewing. Each word felt like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. But then she remembered her father's voice. Don't let noise distract you. Amara, fix what's broken. That's how you prove yourself. By the afternoon, Felix called the team over to a large prototype engine. Sleek, modern, and completely dead. This, he said, tapping the metal shell, is the L-Gen V12 hybrid model. State of the art, except for one problem. It keeps failing the ignition test. The system shuts down after 8 seconds. None of our diagnostics have isolated the cause. He looked at Amara. You might learn something from watching us try to fix it. The team nodded and got to work. Wires were checked, sensors replaced, software rebooted. Yet every time they tried to start it, the engine sputtered, hummed for a moment, and died. Amara stayed silent, watching intently. Her fingers itched to reach for a wrench, but she knew better than to interrupt. After hours of testing, frustration filled the room. One engineer threw his gloves onto the table. It's useless. The fuel-air ratio keeps desensing. Felix rubbed his temples. We've replaced everything except the main control unit. There's nothing left to test. Amara hesitated, then quietly said, May I look at it? Every head turned toward her. Felix blinked. Excuse me? The engine, she said, voice steady now. If you permit, I'll try. The room went silent. Someone chuckled under their breath. You've got to be kidding. Felix frowned. This isn't a game, Miss Amara. That's a multi-million-dollar prototype. I know, she said calmly, but I can see something you're missing. Felix folded his arms, clearly annoyed but curious. Fine. 5 minutes. Touch nothing you can't fix. Amara stepped forward. Her hands hovered over the parts, not with arrogance, but with familiarity, like a pianist greeting an old instrument. She crouched near the intake system, tracing connection from the airflow valve to the ignition module. Her brow furrowed. Sir, she said softly, you replaced the main control unit, but not the backup circuit board that regulates idle airflow, right? Felix frowned. Yes, because it's not part of the ignition sequence. Amara shook her head. It is indirectly. The backup unit delays air intake by half a second on ignition, start to prevent overflooding. But your calibration software isn't syncing that delay. The engine chokes itself before the system stabilizes. Felix blinked, unsure. That's impossible. Not impossible, she said, smiling faintly. Just overlooked. Without waiting for permission, she took a small wrench, adjusted the secondary valve screw by a fraction, and reconnected the control cable. Now try it. Felix hesitated, then signaled an engineer. Start it. The engineer pressed ignition. The engine sputtered once, then roared to life. Smooth, powerful, flawless. The deep hum filled the lab like music. Everyone froze. Felix's eyes widened. That shouldn't have worked. Amara stepped back, her face calm. Engines talk if you listen long enough. The room erupted in murmurs. One engineer whispered, She actually did it. Another said, That's not luck. That's brilliance. Felix just stared at her, speechless. For the first time that day, his tone softened. How did you even notice that? She shrugged. The air pressure didn't sound right when it failed. It was breathing wrong. Felix blinked again, then let out a short laugh. You heard that? Amara smiled. My dad always said, engines breathe like people. If you listen close enough, they'll tell you what hurts. For the first time, the entire team looked at her not as an outsider, but as someone who belonged. Richard Larrington, who had been quietly observing from the upper gallery, smiled faintly and whispered himself, I knew it. Down below, Felix turned to Amara. You've just done in 5 minutes what my team's been trying to solve for weeks. Amara looked at him humbly. I just fixed what was broken. He nodded slowly. Welcome to the team, Miss Amara. And as the newly revived engine purred behind her, Amara realized this was the moment her life truly shifted. The moment she wasn't just a girl for the streets anymore, but the girl who'd earned her place in a world of giants. By the next morning, the story had spread through the entire building. The homeless girl fixed the prototype. Mr. Larrington himself brought her in. Dr. Turner's team couldn't figure it out, but she did. Whispers floated through hallways and cafeteria lines like wildfire. Some people spoke with admiration, others with disbelief, and a few with quiet resentment. Amara, however, tried to ignore it all. She kept her head down, working hard in the lab, determined not to let the sudden attention distract her. Dr. Felix Turner, once skeptical, now watched her differently. Every morning, he greeted her with a respectful nod. Every time she explained a mechanism or caught a mistake, he just smiled and said, "You really do have a gift, don't you?" But not everyone was pleased. Across the lab, a senior engineer named Clara Vance, sharp, confident, and fiercely proud of her degree from MIT, watched Amara with narrowed eyes. "She's not even qualified," Clara said to a colleague one afternoon. "And now the boss is treating her like she's some kind of genius. What does that say about the rest of us?" Her colleague shrugged. She did fix the L-Gen prototype. Clara crossed her arms. Beginner's luck. Let's see how long she lasts when she's really tested. Days passed, and Amara's name started appearing on project boards. Small tasks at first. Testing new sensors, writing reports, observing trial runs. But every time she touched a project, things improved. Engines ran smoother. Diagnostics became clearer, and problems others missed were spotted instantly by her trained eye. Her co-workers couldn't ignore her results, but some still whispered behind her back. One day, as she walked to the cafeteria, she overheard two engineers talking. "She's got Larrington's attention. He visited the lab twice this week. I heard he's considering her for the new quantum engine team." No way. They'd never let someone without a degree lead that. Amara paused mid-step, heart pounding. Quantum engine? That was Larrington Motors' top secret project. An engine that could revolutionize clean energy technology. That night, after everyone left, Amara stayed behind. The lab was quiet, lit only by the soft blue glow of monitors. She walked over to the prototype chamber, peering through the glass. The quantum engine sat there, compact, sleek, and unfinished. Its core shimmered faintly under the light, almost alive. "Beautiful, isn't it?" A voice said behind her. She turned. Richard Larrington stood at the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching her with a gentle smile. "Sir, I didn't mean to." He waved a hand. "Relax, Amara. I'm glad you're curious. Curiosity built this company." She smiled, a bit embarrassed. "I've never seen anything like it. It looks alive." Richard chuckled softly. "That's because it almost is. It's powered by a hybrid pulse system, half mechanical, half AI-driven. If it works, it'll change how the world thinks about engines forever." Amara stepped closer to the glass. "But it's not ready yet." Richard sighed. "No, my top engineers have been stuck for months. The synchronization between the pulse AI and the fuel system keeps breaking down. If it fails during ignition, the whole unit shuts down." Amara's eyes scanned the system diagram displayed on the nearby screen. "It sounds like it's breathing wrong again." Richard smiled knowingly. "That's exactly what Dr. Turner said you'd say." She laughed quietly. "Maybe he's learning." He turned to face her fully. "Amara, tell me something honestly. Do you believe you could fix it?" Her eyes widened. "Me? Sir, I've only been here a few weeks. I don't even know how your AI systems are coded. I'm not asking if you know everything," Richard said calmly. "I'm asking if you believe you can find the answer." She looked at the engine again. Her heart was racing. "If you permit, I'll try." Richard's expression softened. He nodded. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." He handed her a key card. "You'll have access to the prototype chamber starting tomorrow. But understand this. It's a challenge, not an order. You're free to say no." Amara hesitated only a moment before taking the card. "No, sir. I'll try." The next morning, she walked into the lab to find Clara already there, waiting with crossed arms. "So it's true," Clara said coldly. "You're being given access to the quantum project." Amara swallowed hard. "Mr. Larrington asked me to take a look." "Yes." Clara scoffed. "You've been here less than a month. Some of us have been working on that engine for years. And now you get the spotlight. Amara tried to stay calm. I didn't ask for it. He believes I can help. Clara stepped closer. Help? Or take credit for everyone else's work? The air grew tense. Engineers nearby pretended to work, but were clearly listening. Amara stood her ground. I'm not here to compete, Clara. I'm here to fix what's broken, just like everyone else. Clara smirked. We'll see how long that confidence lasts. She turned and stormed out, leaving the room silent. Amara exhaled slowly, shaking off the sting of Clara's words. She put on her safety gloves and entered the prototype chamber. The quantum engine gleamed under the lab lights, waiting. For a moment, she just stood there, taking it in. The complexity, the beauty, the challenge. She whispered to herself, Okay, Dad, let's fix something impossible again. For hours, she studied the schematics, traced the circuits, and listened to the faint hum of the test motors. She didn't need to understand every line of code. She listened to the machine, just like she always did. Something was off, not in the mechanics, but in the timing. The AI's input was a fraction of a second too fast, choking the hybrid pulse before ignition stabilized. She stayed all night, testing, adjusting, calibrating by instinct and sound. When dawn broke, her eyes were tired but focused. Finally, she made one last adjustment, resyncing the pulse delay by exactly 0.37 seconds. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the ignition. The engine started with a soft hum, pulsed once, then twice, steady, strong, alive. She gasped, tears filling her eyes. It worked. The impossible engine breathed. Behind her, slow applause echoed through the chamber. Richard Larrington stood by the doorway, smiling proudly. You've done it again, Amara. She turned, exhausted but glowing. It's working, sir. He nodded. No, you made it work. And in that quiet, shining moment, surrounded by machines and light, Amara realized something deep. That brilliance isn't born in privilege. It's built through perseverance, curiosity, and belief. The next morning, the mansion was filled with quiet anticipation. The marble floors reflected the soft morning sun as maids hurried through the halls, setting breakfast on the long dining table. But despite all the luxury, the place felt strangely different today, lighter somehow. It was as if everyone knew something miraculous had happened the night before, and at the heart of it all was the girl who'd slept on the streets just a day earlier. When Lily woke up, she almost couldn't believe her surroundings. The bed was softer than anything she'd ever felt. The room had a window overlooking a massive garden with fountains that shimmered like diamonds in the sunlight. For a moment, she sat up, dazed, wondering if it was all a dream. But then she saw the oil stain still on her hands, the proof that last night had been real. She had fixed the billionaire's car, something none of the top engineers could do. Downstairs, Mr. Whitmore was sitting by the breakfast table, staring at his coffee but thinking about something else entirely. He'd barely slept. The image of that young girl leaning over the engine with quiet confidence replayed in his mind again and again. Her hands moved like she'd known that machine all her life, like she could feel what it needed. It wasn't luck. It was pure skill. And it wasn't just her ability that impressed him. It was her humility, her courage to say, "If you permit, I will try." He smiled faintly. Those words had changed everything. Just then, his assistant entered the room. "Sir, the girl is awake," he said softly. "She's asking if she should leave." Whitmore's head shot up. "Leave? Absolutely not," he said. "Bring her here." A few moments later, Lily entered hesitantly, wearing clean clothes that one of the staff had lent her. She looked shy, almost apologetic, as if she didn't belong there. Her eyes darted around the massive room, landing briefly on the chandelier, before settling on the floor. Whitmore stood up and smiled warmly. "Good morning, Lily," he said kindly. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir. Thank you. I didn't mean to overstay. I can go now if you like." He shook his head immediately. "No, Lily. I'd like to talk to you first." She froze. "Did I do something wrong with the car?" she asked quickly, her voice trembling. Whitmore chuckled. Quite the opposite, he said. You did something no one else could. That car was worth nearly $10 million, and it was about to be shipped to a specialized lab for diagnosis. Yet, somehow you fixed it, with nothing but your hands and your instinct. Lily looked down, a bit embarrassed. I just listened to the sound of the pistons, she said quietly. It wasn't balanced right. I adjusted the timing manually and cleaned the fuel injector. I used to do that a lot before things got bad. Whitmore tilted his head. Before things got bad? She hesitated, then sighed. My dad used to be a mechanic. He taught me everything. We worked on old cars together in our garage. But after he passed, things went downhill. Bills piled up, the garage was taken away, and I couldn't keep up. I tried getting a job, but no one would hire me without a degree. So I ended up on the street. Her voice cracked at the end, and she quickly looked away to hide the tears in her eyes. Whitmore was silent for a moment. Then he spoke softly. Lily, you don't belong on the street. You belong in a workshop, or better yet, in an innovation lab. You have something rare. Natural intuition, mechanical brilliance, and the courage to act when everyone else hesitates. She blinked in surprise. Me? In a lab? I don't even have proper qualifications. Whitmore smiled. Then we'll fix that. If you're willing, I'll sponsor your education. Engineering school, training, whatever it takes. And when you're ready, you'll have a place in my company. I could use someone like you. Lily stared at him, completely speechless. The idea felt unreal. She'd gone from sleeping under bridges to standing in front of a billionaire offering her future. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say yes, Whitmore said simply. Her lips trembled as she nodded, tears filling her eyes again. But this time, they were tears of hope. From that moment, her life began to change. She started attending classes sponsored by Whitmore Industries. The CEO himself made sure she had mentors and access to every tool she needed. But what impressed everyone wasn't just her knowledge, it was her work ethic. She was always the first to arrive and the last to leave, fixing machines others had given up on, drawing new designs, testing engines late into the night. Months passed, and news spread about the homeless girl engineer whose genius had saved a billionaire's prototype. Reporters wanted interviews, investors wanted meetings, and soon Lily became a symbol of something much greater than mechanics. She represented opportunity. But through it all, she never forgot that night. The cold rain, the broken car, and the moment she gathered her courage to say those 7 little words. If you permit, I will try. And Whitmore never forgot either. He often told the story to his board, his engineers, even his friends. He'd say, sometimes brilliance comes in torn shoes and tired eyes. All it needs is a chance. One evening, as the sun set over the city skyline, Lily stood in the new research center that now bore her name, the Lily Whitmore Innovation Lab. She looked around at the machines, the bright young engineers, and the hum of progress. Her reflection shimmered on the polished floor, and she smiled softly. Dad, she whispered, we made it. Months turned into a year, and the once homeless girl who had slept under a bridge was now walking through the sleek hallways of Whitmore Industries with purpose and pride. The employees, engineers, designers, even senior executives, had grown to respect her deeply. Some had doubted her in the beginning, whispering that she was just a charity case, someone the billionaire had taken pity on. But Lily proved every single one of them wrong. Day after day, she immersed herself in work. She studied every blueprint, every prototype, every system failure the company had ever logged. Her desk was always covered in notes, drawings, and mechanical sketches. She wasn't content with just fixing what was broken. She wanted to create something new, something that could change the world. One evening, as the city lights flickered through the tall glass windows of the research lab, Lily stared at a blank sketch pad. She was stuck on an idea that had been haunting her for weeks, a new type of engine that could run clean, without pollution, without waste. She believed there had to be a way to make engines that work with nature, not against it. Suddenly, a memory flashed through her mind, her father's voice. Machines are like people, Lily. They breathe, they need balance, they need care. You can't force them, you have to understand them. She smiled faintly and picked up her pencil again. Within hours, she was sketching, calculating, testing ideas on her tablet. What began as a dream slowly turned into a blueprint. By midnight, she had something remarkable: the foundation of a zero-emission hybrid engine powered by a self-regenerating magnetic core, something that no one had ever successfully achieved before. It wasn't just science. It was art. Over the next few months, Lily worked tirelessly on her invention, sleeping only a few hours a night. She faced setbacks, explosions, software failures, even ridicule from skeptics who said it was impossible. But every time something broke, she fixed it, just like she'd done all her life. Every failure only fueled her determination. One morning, Whitmore walked in the lab to find her asleep on her desk, surrounded by models and wires. He didn't wake her. Instead, he looked at the machine she'd built, a small metallic prototype that seemed to hum softly even when powered off. His eyes widened as he realized what it was. "Lily," he said quietly when she finally stirred, "did you do this?" She blinked awake, rubbing her eyes. I think it works," she said groggily. "I just need to test it." Whitmore placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression filled with pride. "Then let's do it right. Tomorrow morning, in front of the board." The next day was monumental. The company's top executives gathered in the Innovation Hall, murmuring in curiosity as Lily wheeled in her prototype. Some of them still didn't take her seriously. "She's just a trainee," one whispered. "This will be a waste of time." But Whitmore silenced them with a single look. "Watch and learn," he said calmly. Lily took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were steady. "Good morning," she began. "What you're about to see isn't just a new engine, it's a new way of thinking. It's about giving machines balance again." She pressed a button, and the prototype came alive. It hummed quietly, then glowed faintly with a soft blue light. The display screen showed 0 emissions, 0 fuel consumption, perfect rotation, silent operation. The room fell silent. Then, slowly, the engineers began checking the readings. One by one, their jaws dropped. This shouldn't be possible," one of them whispered. "No combustion? No waste energy?" Lily smiled humbly. "It's not perfect yet," she said, "but it's a start." Whitmore stepped forward, beaming with pride. "This young woman," he said to the stunned board, "has done what billion-dollar labs around the world failed to do. She's built the future." The room erupted into applause. For the first time, Lily felt what true validation meant, not just from one man, but from an entire world of experts who finally saw her for what she was, a genius in her own right. News of her invention spread like wildfire. Major tech magazines called her the girl who redefined power. Universities invited her to speak about innovation. Governments reached out for collaboration. But despite all the fame, Lily remained humble, often saying, "I just fixed one more broken thing." A few months later, Whitmore called her into his office. When she arrived, she noticed a small box on his desk. He smiled warmly as she entered. "Lily," he began, "do you know why I brought you here today?" She shook her head. "Is it about the new patent?" He chuckled. "In a way, yes. Sit down." He slid the box toward her. Inside was a set of gleaming keys, with her name engraved on them. "This," he said, "belongs to the lab you built, the Lily Whitmore Research Wing. You're not just an engineer anymore. You're now the head of our innovation department." Lily's eyes widened. "Head? But there are so many people more qualified." "No one is more qualified than the person who can see what others can't," Whitmore said firmly. "You didn't just fix an engine. You fixed how we see potential." Tears welled up in her eyes as she stood up and hugged him. It wasn't a formal, corporate moment. It was a human one. Two people who had crossed paths by chance, each changing the other's life forever. That night, Lily returned to her small apartment, the first one she'd ever owned. She looked out the window at the city skyline, glowing in the distance. A year ago, she had been invisible, forgotten, sleeping in the cold. Now, she was building the future. She whispered softly to herself, All I needed was one person to permit me to try. Her reflection in the glass smiled back, stronger and brighter than ever. A year had passed since Lily's groundbreaking invention changed the world. Whitmore Industries had become a global leader in clean energy, and her magnetic hybrid engine was now powering entire cities. But for Lily, success was never about the fame, the wealth, or the recognition. It was about purpose, about proving that even someone who had once been forgotten by the world could still make it brighter. Still, despite all the progress, she remained the same humble, kind-hearted woman she had always been. She often spent her weekends volunteering at homeless shelters, fixing old appliances, and talking to people who reminded her of her younger self. She never wanted anyone to feel as hopeless as she once did. One sunny afternoon, she received an unexpected call from Mr. Whitmore himself. His tone was warm but slightly mysterious. "Lily," he said, "I'd like you to come to the countryside this weekend. There's something I want to show you." She smiled. "Is this another project?" He chuckled. "Something like that. But this one is personal." When Saturday arrived, a sleek black car picked her up and drove through winding green hills until it stopped in front of a wide-open field surrounded by trees. It was peaceful, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. Birds chirped overhead, and in the distance, Lily could see something being built. Large metal frames, half-finished buildings, and construction vehicles buzzing around. Whitmore stood there waiting, hands in his pockets, smiling as she approached. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" he said. Lily looked around, puzzled. "What is this place?" "This," he said, "is my final project. And it's yours, too." She blinked. "Mine." He nodded, his eyes filled with emotion. "When you fixed my car that night, I didn't just find an engineer. I found a reminder that potential can come from anywhere. That brilliance doesn't wear a label. I realize that for every Lily out there, there are thousands of others who never get the chance to be heard. This place will change that." He gestured toward the construction site. A large banner flapped in the wind, and when Lily turned to look, her breath caught in her throat. It read, "The Lilly Foundation for Innovation, Empowering Forgotten Geniuses." Her hands flew to her mouth. "Mr. Whitmore, you named it after me?" He smiled gently. "You inspired it. This foundation will find young people like you, homeless kids, dropouts, underdogs with dreams but no opportunities. We'll give them tools, mentors, labs, and hope. You'll run it. You'll be their leader. They're proof that it's possible." Lily's eyes filled with tears as she stared at the sign, then back at him. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said again, the same way he had when he first offered to sponsor her. "That's all you ever had to do." She laughed softly through her tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Whitmore nodded with satisfaction. "Then it's settled. We start next month. But before that, there's one more thing." He motioned for her to follow him toward a small garage at the edge of the field. When he opened the door, Lily froze. Inside was a car, a stunning, vintage model, sleek and restored to perfection. She recognized it instantly. It was his car, the same one that had broken down that rainy night. Except now, it gleamed under the sunlight like it was brand new. "I kept it," Whitmore said, walking around it with a nostalgic smile. "Every time I saw it, I remembered that night. The rain, the frustration, and then you. I thought it was just a broken engine, but it turned out to be the moment my life changed." Lily stepped closer, running her hand gently along the car's hood. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He nodded. "It's more than that. Look inside." She opened the door and gasped. On the dashboard was a small metal plaque. It read, "If you permit, I will try. Lily Morgan, 2024. Her heart swelled. Those were her words. The 7 words that had started it all. Whitmore looked at her kindly. "I had that engraved as a reminder to myself and to everyone who sees this car that sometimes the smallest act of courage can change everything. You didn't ask for money. You didn't ask for fame. You just asked for permission to try. That's what the world needs more of." Tears streamed down her face as she looked at him. "You gave me a chance when no one else did. You didn't see a homeless girl. You saw potential." Whitmore smiled softly. Maybe, but you're the one who proved me right. For a long moment, they stood there in silence, watching the sunlight bounce off the car's chrome. Then Whitmore handed her a set of keys. Go on, he said. It's yours. She looked at him in shock. Mine? I can't. Yes, you can, he interrupted gently. It belongs to the person who brought it back to life. Lily took the keys slowly, still in disbelief. She slid into the driver's seat, turned the ignition, and the engine purred softly, the same way it had the night she fixed it. Except this time, it wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of everything she had overcome. As the engine hummed, Whitmore leaned down beside her window. You know, he said, smiling, when I first met you, I was looking for someone to fix a machine. But what you fixed was something much bigger. What's that? She asked. He smiled sadly. My belief in people. Lily's throat tightened. She couldn't find the words, so she simply nodded, tears still glistening in her eyes. Then she drove slowly around the open field, the wind whipping through her hair. It wasn't just a test drive. It was freedom. It was triumph. It was life coming full circle. When she parked the car again, Whitmore extended his hand. So, Ms. Morgan, he said warmly, are you ready to build a new generation of dreamers? She took his hand firmly and smiled through her tears. I've been ready since the night I asked. If you permit, I will try. He laughed gently. Then let's give the world permission. The camera of life zoomed out. Two figures standing side by side in a golden field, the sound of a reborn engine echoing softly in the background. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon in hues of orange and gold. And from that moment, the world would remember the girl who fixed more than a billionaire's car. She fixed the future.